anniversary of the armistice ending World War I, at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. 90 years ago today, President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed that the war to make the world safe for democracy was finally and successfully concluded. For 2 full minutes, in the middle of that day, all traffic and business across our nation stopped. Americans took time to remember family, friends, and neighbors who fought in that war. But most especially, they remembered those who never came home for what was called the war to end all wars. I don't believe that those men and women of that time could ever have imagined that at so many other times in the last 90 years, young Americans would again be asked to fight and die for freedom in foreign lands. When the 20th century began, the headstones that stand in silent formation on the beautiful hills of Arlington National Cemetery covered fewer than 200 acres. Today, 8 years into the 21st century, they cover more than 600 acres. Above each of these graves, there mourns a loved one, and below each headstone, there lies a hero. Millions of people in our country and in countries around the world sleep in peace today because of the more than 1 million Americans who rest in peace in graves, marked and unmarked, all across the world. Today we come together to say to these, we owe you a debt that we can never repay. In a way, the young men and women who have died in defense of our country gave up not only the life they were living, but also the life they would have lived. Their chance to prosper, to love, to parent children, their chance to grow old with their grandchildren. Too often when we speak of sacrifice, we speak in general terms about the larger sweep of history and the sum total of our nation's experience. But it is imperative for us to remember that every single veteran's life we honor today was just that, a life, just like yours and like mine. A life with family and friends, a life with love and hopes and dreams, a life of ups and downs, a life that should have been played out to its full natural course. 66 years ago this week, 1942, the eyes of America were focused on a small, sweltering island in the South Pacific. Pearl Harbor had been bombed the year before, and the Japanese forces in the Pacific were capturing one island after another. The task of stopping them fell to a group of young Marines in an operation called Project Watchtower in a place called Guadalcanal. The battle was expected to last 6 weeks. It lasted 6 months. But that battle turned the tide in the whole Pacific campaign, and with it, the tide of American history. On that small island in the Battle of Guadalcanal, Americans proved that our nation would never again be an island, but a nation allied with freedom and peace-loving people everywhere in the world. The nation with the greatest force for peace and freedom the world has ever known. In the days and the years that have followed, men and women infused with the same determination in every branch of our military service have built on our sacrifices. They have stood for the cause of freedom from World War II to Korea, to Vietnam, to Beirut, to Kosovo, to Kuwait, to Operation Desert Storm, and to our current involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan. Today, we must try to imagine a measure of all the lives that might have been had they not been laid down in service to our nation? What about those more than 1 million men and women who have given their lives so that we could be free? What would have been the measure of their lives? What else would have they accomplished for their families, for their country, if only they had had the chance? We do not know the answer to these questions, but because we do have the questions, then we clearly have the responsibility to stand in the breach for them. We are not just the beneficiaries of their bravery. We are the stewards of their sacrifice. It is therefore our solemn obligation to always strive for peace, to make the most of this moment for our children and the children of the world. That those who sacrifice so much to bring us to this moment will be redeemed in the lives they could have lived by the lives that we do live. How shall we do this? It means that we must continue to be the world's leading force for peace and freedom in the world. It means we must keep the commitment that we have had, that our men and women in uniform will remain the best trained, the best equipped, and the best prepared in the world. It means we must do more to be faithful to our veterans when their service is over. President Theodore Roosevelt once said that anyone good enough to shed his blood for his country is good enough to be given a square deal afterwards. This responsibility, this obligation, we must not ignore today. Many of our veterans today are returning home from Iraq and Afghanistan with grave injuries and wounds. We shall see to it that they receive the best medical care possible to bind up their wounds. Anything less than this is totally unacceptable. We must also bear in mind the special sacrifice of more than 140,000 veterans who have been held in prison camps or who have been interned during the last 100 years. Finally, fulfilling our responsibility to lead for peace and freedom and to be faithful not only to our service personnel but to our veterans require that we do more than prepare people to fight wars and to take care of them when they come home. We must work with greater determination to prevent wars. Every American who gave his or her life for our country was, one way or another, a victim of a peace that faltered, of diplomacy that failed, of the absence of adequate preventive strength. We know that if diplomacy is not backed by real and credible threats of force, it can be empty and even dangerous. But if we do not use diplomacy first, then our military will become our only line of defense. But all of you know that freedom is not free. And all of you know that the costliest peace is far less expensive than the cheapest war. Hopefully soon we will be able to say that the conflicts that have caused so much bloodshed, that have taken so many American lives, will become a memory of the past. So we gather today. We gather to dedicate ourselves to being good stewards of the sacrifice of the veterans of our country. As we look ahead to the many challenges of the first years of our new century, let us resolve to honor those veterans, to redeem their sacrifice, to be stewards of the lives that they never had a chance to live. And how can we accomplish this? We accomplish it by doing all that we can to see that the horrors of war, the casualties of conflict, will never again be visited upon us as we move forward in our new century. For truly, that is the proper way to honor those, to remember those whom we came here today to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you, veterans, for your service. And may God bless America now and in the future with peace and harmony throughout the world. Thank you.